So today, government subsidies. It's interesting how we complained about paying money to the EU for that money to be spent on subsidies, some of which came back to the UK, and that was all big news because we didn't have control over where that money was going. But now, Britain wants to set up its own subsidy programme, and it's not even registering in the news agenda. So as the UK government published the UK Subsidy Control Bill, what should subsidies look like? We'll look at that today on the podcast, and what subsidies are needed. All of that in the next half hour on the Debunking Economics podcast with Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie. Welcome along. Well, you know, it's probably got lost in amongst all the other news about COVID and the fact that the UK is about to go back to life as normal, even though the rising infection numbers are getting bigger every day. But this week, the UK government announced a new approach to subsidies to replace the approach taken by the EU. It's all down to the Subsidy Control Bill. Not heard about this? No, I'm not surprised. There's not been a peep about it in the media. The description from the UK government is the Subsidy Control Bill provides the framework for a new UK-wide subsidy control regime. It's all about control for everybody apart from the federal government. This regime will enable public authorities, including devolved administrations and local authorities, to deliver subsidies that are tailored and bespoke for local needs to deliver government priorities such as levelling up and achieving net zero carbon, says the description, as well as supporting the economy's recovery from COVID-19. So these are the rules set by the government by which all authorities, right down to local authorities, must adhere to if they're to give any form of subsidy to anyone. You know, you would have thought this would be something worthy of a bit of a public attention, wouldn't you? But as I say, not a peep on it in the media. No public discourse whatsoever. It doesn't, of course, include the big federal level subsidies like how much we pay train companies or how much the UK government paid Nissan to stay in Sunderland after Brexit. That's all secret squirrel stuff. But if the Scottish government wants to spend any money whatsoever to offer a subsidy, then that needs to go onto the publicly available database, which is part of this subsidy control bill. And if you're interested in this sort of stuff, because some of them are a little bit esoteric, I have to say, then you can go and look it up and see what money is being spent where, apart from, you know, the big amounts being spent by the central government. So the fact that we have subsidies at all, Steve, I mean, this is a recognition that the economic system that Adam Smith described doesn't work, does it? I mean, it doesn't look after itself. The economy, the government clearly needs to step in and spend money. This is an admission of defeat, isn't it, for pure economics?
Well, you've got economic theory, which really begins not so much with Adam Smith as with the neoclassicals arguing they don't touch the price system. The price, let the market determine prices and you'll get the best of all possible worlds type outcome. And that is what dominates neoclassical economics in general, and it therefore dominates economic policy about trade regulations and so on. So this is just in some ways this is determined not by the needs of industry or government, but by the needs of economic theory. Because they're trying to say, well, any subsidies at all distort the market outcome. And so the only type of subsidies they'd allow are ones where they regard the market as being insufficient in its own right. And that normally relates to the absence of property rights. So if you look at the way they try to handle carbon dioxide generation and pollution in general, they say, well, that's an externality. The people who pollute get a benefit. They don't have to pay for the cost of the pollution. So you want to penalise those. And equally, if you have, the classic example they give is bee farmers. Bee farmers get rewarded by selling the honey, but they don't get rewarded by fertilising all the plants that the bees fertilise to make the honey. And therefore, we don't have as many bees as we should have, and therefore subsidies will make the market system work as if there was a property right for fertilisation of plants. And that's the sort of logic behind this whole approach to trying to control subsidies. Right.
But we also know that if you didn't have subsidies, unless there were subsidies like that, which are correcting things that are not accounted for in the economic system, that's what that's saying, isn't it, really? It's like that no money is exchanged in the fertilizing of plants, so we need to ensure money does change hands to make sure that the system is balanced. But we know that even if the system was supposedly balanced like that, we'd still have poor people getting poorer, rich people getting richer, old industries continuing and new industries not replacing them because they can't compete against the power of the old industries. A whole load of entrenched ways the economy operates, which would be impossible to break through without the use of subsidies.
Well, I mean, economists are always going to push back against that. Neoclassical ones, obviously, not so much me, because they'll say that any market intervention has to be tested to show whether it generates social benefits or not. And this is really, I think, that law. It sounds to me like it's been framed by a bunch of neoclassical economists saying, "Yeah, we want to allow subsidies, but we don't want them to distort the market system." And that's what I imagine those regulations are about. But the problem, and this comes down to, is it true that a free market grows faster than one that has regulations or subsidies? And the empirical data is categorical that no, that's not true. When you look at countries which have been successful in growing, from very underdeveloped states, like Japan, South Korea, China, and so on, Germany as well, at various stages in industrialization, and for that matter, America, what you find is that the period of growth often coincides with quite strong government intervention to basically, when you look at national laws, to twist the playing field in favour of local producers, but to put them under pressure so that they have to industrialise and develop very quickly. So, I don't think there wouldn't be any awareness of the potential nation-building role of subsidies in that bill, I would expect.
No. Well, I think part of the bill I get, because if you click on the website for it, you can see 300 or 350 subsidy projects from local authorities and national governments, like for Scotland, for example, where they are putting money behind projects, and you're thinking, what is the point of that? So, for example, in North Yorkshire, there's a bit of government money that's gone into supporting the building of an industrial park. You think, well, surely the industrial park can, it's going to be charging people to be there. Surely it can make its own way. And then there's an example of the Scottish government giving money to WHP Telecoms, which I think are basically a telecoms infrastructure provider. They're giving them £16 million. This is the Scottish government for a 4G infill program. And they list some of the places where this infill program is operating, in a little village, I should say, of Little Mill. The name says it all, doesn't it? Population of 35.
Little Mill, yeah. Okay.
Little Mill.
How many people?
35.
35, okay.
It's very close to Nairn in Nairnshire, but now they've got a 4G mobile site, which is being retailed through EE. There's 21 sites so far. That's an example of one of them. 16 million of government money's gone into that. You're thinking, well, if it's not, in that case, if it's not commercially viable, sorry, people of Little Mill, move to Nairn. You can get 4G coverage there.
No, I'm going to come out swinging for Little Mill here. I'm actually going to use an example. You and I, you being ex-Aussies, I hope you remember this one. Ever heard of a guy called Kerry Packer?
Yes, of course.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. Kerry Packer died.
Yeah,
twice. Yeah,
well, his helicopter pilot gave him a spare lung, didn't he?
No, that's actually made it 2.5 times. No, he died once on the polo field.
Right, okay.
He had a heart attack. He died, and he was revived because the ambulance passing that happened to be in the region at the time had a defibrillator. So they hit him with that. He came back to life again. He, by the way, swore after there was no life after death. It was just blank until he got reactivated by the Frankenstein switch, and. His response to that, and this is one, sometimes your capitalist overlords aren't entirely bad. He then purchased a defibrillator for every ambulance in Australia, and the logic being that you don't know where you're going to have a heart attack. Now, the same sort of thing applies to telecommunications coverage. You don't know when you're going to run out of signal. So if you look at like a town of Mill down, is this what down Mill 14-day? 14 hours a day? Little Mill, okay, pardon me. Maybe they worked 18 hours a day in Little Mill. Sorry for the Monty Python reference. But yeah, you don't know whether you're going to need that in that location. But if you make a commercial decision about it, you don't put the cable in there, because what's the point of providing an expensive telecommunications infrastructure to 14 people? But at the same time, partly the existence of that infrastructure is partly what defines a civilized society. Yeah. And another classic instance, I remember that which very vividly, was my first wife had good friends living in the Hills district of Sydney, and the average property there was 5 acres, so we're not talking poor here. But 5 acres means there's a large amount of land between each house. There aren't many houses. And so when both Telstra and your old company, Optus, were competitively laying optical fibre to cable TV back in those days, neither of them put it down that street.
So that is a problem of the way companies are operating. So what should happen? Should governments be saying, well, you can't do that? And that becomes a political decision. Similarly, it seems whenever governments start issuing subsidies, that is largely a political decision as well. How do you get over that and make sure that money is going where it's most needed? Well, we've got a full-length discussion on this, a good 35 or 40 minutes. If you want to hear it in full, you need to become a supporter of Steve Keen on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Prof Steve Keen, or you need to become a subscriber at debunkingeconomics.com. Next week, we're going to look at the rather complicated subject of thermodynamics and economics. Should the two be molded together, and how would that change things? We'll look at that next week. I'm Phil Dobbie. He's Steve Keen. Thanks for listening. Catch you again soon.